Courtland Sutton is holding out from Broncos voluntary workouts. So we're going to recap everything we know so far, kind of go over the facts, and then talk about what could be next, whether that's a new contract or a trade possibly. But Tom Pelissero was the first one to report the news that Courtland Sutton did not report Monday for voluntary workouts as he seeks a new contract per source. Sutton is going on his 10th starting QB. I love this last part here. In 7 seasons and has only $2 million in guaranteed left on his deal. He had 10 touchdowns in 2023 while ranking 56 in targets. You can just tell that Tom Pelissero literally copied that from the text message he got from Courtland Sutton's agent, making him out to be some kind of martyr, like he's had 10 QBs and he only had 56 targets. Like, all right, we understand it. He had some tough issues and he went through a lot in Denver so far, but like that to me just kind of made me chuckle. Now, before we get to the rest of the news so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel though, because if a new contract comes out or a trade happens, you know we're going to be breaking it down here on the channel. So stay in the loop and help us get to 21,500 subscribers. So as Tom Pelissero pointed out, there's only $2 million in guaranteed money left for Sutton, and he's got 2 years left on his contract. So we often see holdouts happen, right? CeeDee Lamb is doing that right now with the Dallas Cowboys. All-stars players do this at some point. For me, this one's a little bit peculiar because he's got more than just 1 year left on his deal. He's got 2 years left, and he's got a pretty comfy contract. Like, he's got $13.6 million in cash waiting for him in 2024. So it's really all about the guaranteed money and him getting some assurance that he's going to be here, I think, beyond 2024. I don't think there's any plan of Denver having a surprise cut with Courtland Sutton. But I think he wants to know that he's got guaranteed money for 2025. That is my suspicion for what Courtland Sutton is ultimately looking for. Can he lock down guaranteed money beyond 2024 as there's only $2 million left? I don't think he's looking for a brand new contract for a massive pay raise. He got a pretty nice contract extension from Denver in 2021, right? It was 4 years, $60+ million, $13 million in cash for this season. Sure, that's not top 10 wide receiver money, but is anyone going to argue that Courtland Sutton is a top 10 wide receiver in this league? So I think the contract is fair and maybe even a little bit of an overpay if you're going like dollar for dollar for receptions, yards, and touchdowns. But again, players, they only care about the guaranteed money, and I don't blame them because Courtland Sutton, he's already suffered one knee injury in his career. He knows how quickly a player can somewhat disappear from the league because of injury. So I don't blame him for wanting to get more guaranteed money. I don't know how successful he'll be in that. Now, the other kind of working rumor/idea is Courtland Sutton was closest with Russell Wilson. And with him in Pittsburgh now, is there a possibility that Sutton is just overall displeased with the direction Denver is heading? Did not like the Broncos moving on from Russell Wilson. They don't seem to have a clear plan in place to how they plan to replace Russell Wilson other than just handing it over to Jarrett Stidham. And maybe Sutton is sitting there thinking, I've only got $2 million guaranteed left. That alone kind of ruffles my feathers, but I got $13 million in cash coming my way. Like, I could play under this contract, no big deal. But add in the fact that they got rid of my guy Russell Wilson, and Pittsburgh, who traded Deontay Johnson away, they could be in the services of another wide receiver. Maybe he feels like now is a good time to try and force his way a little bit out of the Broncos. That is definitely just me connecting dots. By no means is that a source or anything, but it's just something to put in the back of your mind because I don't envision a contract extension coming. Courtland Sutton will turn 29 years old in October, and we know that wide receivers and just players in general tend to fall off a little bit when they approach 30 years old. You do get your exceptions. You do get your superstar players that continue playing well into the later stages of his career. And if you're Sutton, you're looking at this, last 4 seasons, excluding 2020 when he tore his ACL, and he's got 10 touchdowns his last time out. So that alone should have a really positive indication of the trajectory Sutton is going on. But for me, I look at, how about the 772 yards and the 10 touchdowns? I think Sutton benefited from a dreadful run game in the red zone for Denver, where they were just better off lobbing it up to Courtland Sutton at the 3-yard line than actually handing it off to Javonte Williams or any other running back. And he did a great job at that. Give him credit. Like 10 touchdowns is not an easy thing to do, but I don't know if that's sustainable, right? What if we get to next year and the Broncos' ground game is much more improved in the red zone and they don't have to just lob it up to Sutton? I think those 10 touchdowns will quickly disappear. And my suspicion is Denver probably knows that as well. So they're not dying to give a contract extension out to a soon-to-be 29-year-old wide receiver who doesn't separate super well, right? He doesn't have great speed that is not going to deteriorate super quickly. No, he unfortunately wins off of a unsustainable practice, jump ball type of receiver that as you get older and you don't, get as much separation from DBs as you once did, if you were already struggling at that earlier in your career, not the best at it, I wouldn't say struggling, and that element of your game is quickly going to deteriorate, I've got concerns about whether or not you are someone that's going to be successful later in your career. To me, I get Allen Robinson vibes, and I'd love to be proven wrong on this. But Allen Robinson, back in 2020 with the Bears, he put up 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had a really good, strong start to his career in Chicago. And Bears fans were begging Chicago and that front office in Hallis Hall to extend Allen Robinson. That was the mantra. And the Bears did it. And they look back at this as a good decision, despite him putting up good numbers in 18 and 19 and 2020. And then you see his last year in Chicago, only 12 games, but just 400-plus yards, 1 touchdown. He goes to the Rams. It was probably the worst contract ever given out in free agency by the Rams. It was a 3-year deal worth $30 to $40+ million. And they moved on from him after just 1 season. And last year in Pittsburgh, 280 yards, no touchdowns. So I fear that this is the type of career path that Sutton may be following, that you've got 2 receivers that the way they win just doesn't really stretch over a long period of time. And that's why if I were the Broncos, I would not give Courtland Sutton an extension. I think he's a great player right now. I think he's a great influence in this locker room. I think he's one of the most consistent pieces this team has had for the last 5 or so years. And this is a tough thing to say out loud, but from a business standpoint, I don't think Courtland Sutton's style of play is going to hold up over the future, and I fear that this could be a contract extension that the Broncos quickly regret in 1 to 2 seasons. So should Denver redo Sutton's contract? The easy solution here is to give him more guaranteed money. My guess is he wants guaranteed money for 2025, and so that definitely would make the possibility of moving on from him after 2024 a lot more difficult if that's something Denver foresees as a possibility. But if it's just about giving him more guaranteed money for 2024, yeah, why not? I fully expect him to be a part of this team. I don't think he's going to be a surprise cut candidate in training camp. So if it really just comes down to moving some money around and giving it more guaranteed in 2024, sure, let's get it done. If it's 2025 guaranteed, that I think Denver may have a hiccup over. Now, next up on the show, I want to talk about a possible trade amid this holdout, because that does happen when players hold out every so often. So we'll break down that possibility and talk about where he could go and what Denver could get in return. But first, I do want to remind you guys about a great hat that they have over on Fanatics for Broncos Country. I think it's a pretty cool hat. Producer Trace, before we started filming, he's not a Broncos fan. He's just helping me out today. And he's like, not going to lie, it's actually a pretty cool hat that I think I would even rock, even though I'm a Saints fan. So if a Saints fan is saying that, and we know that the pipeline from New Orleans to Denver is very real, why don't you get yourself an awesome new Broncos hat? Go to chatsports.com/Broncos hat. I know you already forgot that, despite me saying it 2 seconds ago. So I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Now, let's talk about a Courtland Sutton trade, because let's say he is dug in. Like, he is not breaking this holdout. It continues into training camp and whatnot, or that's at least something Denver could see happening, and both sides are very far apart. Maybe Denver decides, we're going to rebuild anyway. Might as well try and get some more trade assets or trade picks, or I beg your pardon, draft picks for Courtland Sutton. So he's definitely a possible trade chip. if Denver is thinking this does not look like it'll have a peaceful ending. It's very early on. They're voluntary workouts. I don't want you to look at this as like a, oh my God, this is a Mount Everest type of holdout right now. No, we are still in the infancy stages of this. But the issue is Denver doesn't have time to wait and see how this ends. The NFL draft is right around the corner. And their best time to get something for him is now. Because if they wait till after the draft, if they hope and pray that he turns a corner and decides to return, and he doesn't, and into training camp it's clear that the two sides are very far apart and they have to make a trade now. The difference between trading Sutton before the draft versus after the draft is monumental in my opinion. If you trade him before the draft, let's say you get a 4th-round pick for him, whatever pick you want to call it, okay? You can then use that pick on a player that will help you in 2024. If you trade him after the draft, you get a 2025 draft pick. And so now you don't have a draft pick for this year to help you out in 2024, and you don't have Courtland Sutton. You're almost down like 2 players because the pick you're getting for Sutton, that guy's not going to be on your team until next year. You follow what I'm saying? So it's really important that if Denver foresees this as a possible rough ending, to move on it quickly rather than wait till after the draft because now they don't have Sutton nor a player they drafted, which the pick they would get for Sutton for the 2024 season. So if you're looking for what it could cost in a trade, I mean, I think the Jerry Jeudy trade is a decent blueprint. The key thing here that gets excluded is that, sure, I thought Denver would get a little bit more from Jeudy, but they also got big cap space, right? Cleveland took on Jerry Jeudy's entire contract. What was it, $16.9 million? So that's major cap relief for Denver. And that's why they didn't get more in return. So Courtland Sutton, he's got a $13 million base salary. I think some of it's already been paid out. So if a team traded for him, they would only be taking on about $11 to $13 million in a cap hit. So about $6-7 million cheaper than Jerry Jeudy, which is why I think you could get a 4th-round pick for Courtland Sutton. I've also got a 6th-rounder going back to Pittsburgh in this trade idea I cooked up where maybe Pittsburgh decides, hey, let's invest in Russell Wilson. Him and Courtland Sutton surely had a connection. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's bring him on over and give Denver a 4th-round pick. And in exchange, the Broncos send, I think, their last pick in the draft over to Pittsburgh to get a better draft pick earlier in day 3. So this is a rough idea as to what you could get for Courtland Sutton in a deal. Now, if you were in charge, would you trade Courtland Sutton or would you keep him? I think there's no wrong answer here. I think you can make good arguments on both sides. I think that it's very important to know how serious this holdout is. Like, is Courtland Sutton simply looking for more guaranteed money in 2024? If that's the case, that seems like something that can reasonably be accomplished in the near future. If he's upset with the direction this team is headed and he wants guaranteed money in 2025, the last year of his contract, that may be something Denver's not willing to bend on. And then they could look to trade, which is where I sort of land at. Don't half-ass a rebuild. And if you're truly resetting, you may as well try and get as much draft picks as possible for players that likely aren't going to be here if this team or when this team, gets back on track, right? If the Broncos are winning playoff games in the next few seasons, I think it's likely going to be because of the draft picks they hit on, not because of the current veterans on the team. And I know that's really tough to say because those guys have been a part of some really down seasons and they should be a part of the success because of what they've gone through and all the losing. But unfortunately, that's just not how sports work. So for a 28, near 29-year-old wide receiver, if you could get a 4th-round pick for him, I'd be very inclined to do so. Now, what about using Courtland Sutton in a trade-up? This idea has been floated out there where Denver could use Sutton to try and get a better draft pick in round 1 to try and land J.J. McCarthy. And this is my best trade idea with a good dose of realism put into it. I don't think you're going to touch the top 3. Definitely not Chicago or Washington. We'll talk about the Patriots next. So that leaves the Cardinals at 4. That's a possibility. The Chargers are not trading with the Broncos, so rule out 5. And that leaves the Giants at 6. So what if there's just a little bit of chaos and we don't see J.J. McCarthy go top 4, top 5. Maybe Denver calls New York and says, listen, G-Men, let's swap first rounders this year. We're going to give you our first next season. And I know you were hoping to get a wide receiver at pick number 6. How about Courtland Sutton to hold you over, and you can go get a really good offensive lineman at pick number 12? That could be something where the Giants go, lineman at 12, good wide receiver in Sutton, and a future first, which, I mean, they have fair reason to believe could be an early first-round pick based on the way the Broncos have played the last few years and no clear direction at quarterback. They may be thinking we could be getting a top 5 pick next year's draft, the same way Seattle did with their trade with Denver. So the question really becomes, will two teams trade down? Like literally right before we started filming, my friend from Breckenridge texted me, will the Broncos trade up to get a quarterback? And I responded with, you're going to need two teams to trade down because I know the Vikings are going to trade up. So if the Vikings are trading up and you're going to see quarterbacks go 1 and 2, and the Vikings go to either 3 or 4 or 5, well, those are 3 teams picking quarterbacks, Chicago, Washington, Minnesota. And if New England likely goes chalk and takes a quarterback as well, what is Denver trading up for? The top 4 quarterbacks are gone. So you're going to need 2 teams to trade down, right? Because the Vikings, let's say they move up with Arizona or the Chargers or the Patriots. Well, if they move up and they go get Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels, whoever the Commanders don't pick, that means the Broncos have an opportunity to trade up to get J.J. McCarthy, but you're going to need a second team to trade down. So is a team like New England open to trading back? The Broncos need the Patriots to trade back. Because if New England stays at number 3 and picks a quarterback, then there's only one dance partner left, and it's the Vikings. They're going to move up before the Broncos do. Here's what Peter Schrager recently put in a mock draft filled with everything he's hearing in the NFL draft. Despite lots of smoke that New England could trade down, I believe this new Patriots regime will be comfortable with either Jayden Daniels or Maye. Pat's brass took Maye out for steaks the night before his Foxborough visit earlier this month, and those guys loved the Charlotte native. That said, they also loved their top 30 visit with Daniels. I think they're fine with whichever one falls to them. New England also wined and dined QB J.J. McCarthy on Monday night, but I still see the selection being Daniels or Maye. So the point I'm really trying to drive home here is if New England stays at 3 and they take the sloppy seconds from the Commanders, it's down to Denver and Minnesota to try and race up to get J.J. McCarthy with the Cardinals, the Chargers, or the Giants. And when you look at the trade assets, I just really struggle finding a way that Denver makes a better offer than the Vikings do. Right? The Vikings can offer an earlier first-round pick this year, just one spot, 11. They can also offer the 23rd overall pick this year, so 2 firsts, and their first-round pick next year. So a slim chance is if a team trading with either team decides, like let's say it's the Cardinals, we would rather have Denver's 12th overall pick this year and their first-round pick the next 2 years instead of 11, 23, and next year's first. And I think there's actually some logic behind that, despite the Vikings having earlier draft picks to offer. 23rd's a little bit late in the draft. Maybe Arizona feels like Denver's going to have bad picks the next 2 seasons, and we're going to be picking top 10 every single time instead of getting the 23rd overall pick. I personally would not make that bet with Sean Payton being the head coach of the team. But if Arizona or the Giants or the Chargers, I doubt that trade happens, think that way, then maybe. The other possibility is Patrick Surtain. What if he is the X factor, where the Vikings call Arizona and they say, we'll give you pick 11, pick 23, and our first-round pick next year, and a second or a third. And the Broncos call and go, listen, we can't give you 2 firsts this year. We can give you pick 12. We can give you our first next year and our first the following year. And we know that the GM in Arizona may not even have a job in 2026, right? So that's a dicey trade to make where you are trading for a pick so far from now that the next GM who replaces you because you didn't take the offer with multiple first-round picks this year, he could be making that 2026 first-round pick. Maybe the Cardinals GM goes, listen, I'm not interested in pick 23. you toss in Patrick Surtain, and this is a done deal. And I will take the Broncos offer over what might be a better trade offer from the Vikings when just looking at the draft capital. But if Arizona views Patrick Surtain that highly, that may be something that gets Denver in front of Minnesota. I've got no real belief that the Broncos are looking to move on from Surtain, nor do I know if that's how the way Arizona, the Chargers, or the Giants would feel. But that's like the only hope I think the Broncos have. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I always appreciate those of you that watch all the way to the end of the video. If you're still watching right now, shout out to Johnny. He was in the comment section saying, get some Broncos gear on, PD. Answer the call. Drop a DEN for me down below if you're still watching right now.